Major support for Carolina Business Review is provided by Grant Thornton. Operating in more than 100 countries, our tax, audit, and advisory professionals specialize in helping companies unlock their growth potential. Colonial Life, providing benefits to employees to help them protect their family, their finances, and their futures. And Sunoco, a global manufacturer of consumer and industrial packaging products and provider of packaging services with more than 300 operations in 35 countries.
It is a sensitive time internationally around things like the uncertainty of Brexit, trade with China, global economies, are they tipping toward expansion or contraction? And these things are not at an arm's length from us because any or all could exacerbate the Carolinas import-export business. Welcome again to the most widely watched source of Carolina business, policy, and public affairs. I am Chris William. And on this program, someone who is neck deep in international trade, not just because he's the chairman emeritus at one of the nation's largest steel companies and recyclers, Nucor, but also because he has helped and is engaged in trade policy specifically with China for the Trump administration. In a moment, we will meet and welcome again to this dialogue, Dan DiMicco.
Gratefully acknowledging support by Blue Cross Blue Shield of South Carolina, an independent licensee of the Blue Cross and Blue Shield Association. Visit us at southcarolinablues.com. The Duke Endowment, a private foundation enriching communities in the Carolinas through higher education, healthcare, rural churches, and children's services. BARINGS, a leading global asset management firm dedicated to meeting the evolving investment and capital needs of its clients. Learn more at barings.com. On this edition of Carolina Business Review, an executive profile featuring Dan DiMicco, retired CEO and Chairman Emeritus at Nucor Corporation and majority owner of the Charlotte Independents.
Welcome to our program, Mr. Chairman. Welcome. It's nice to have you back.
My pleasure to be here, Chris. Thank you.
Well, I'm glad to see it. You know, I want to start at a couple places, Dan. I want to start with trade. I want to talk about China. I want to talk about manufacturing and all those things. But let me read something first because this is going to go into our dialogue. You were appointed to the U.S. Manufacturing Council in 2008. You served on the boards of the National Association of Manufacturers, NAM, of course, World Steel Association, Board of Directors for Duke Energy, of which you're still on. You continue to represent Nucor in the U.S. Council on Competitiveness, and the chairman of the Coalition for a Prosperous America, et cetera, but also served as senior trade and do serve as senior trade and economic advisor to the Trump campaign at the beginning and the lead for the USTR transition team, or the U.S. Trade Representative Transition Team.
It's a mouthful, Chris.
God bless you, man. And thank you for doing it. So where to start with Dan DiMicco? You know, we really talked about this a lot. Dan, we'll start with China.
Sure.
U.S. and China.
Yeah.
You've been saying very passionately for a long time
20 years.
that they need to be held accountable to some type of level playing field. How long, when would you expect that there could be some satisfying agreement between the U.S. and China? And what does that look like?
Quite honestly, I'm not sure there can be a satisfying agreement between the U.S. and China, because the China situation has morphed into something much more serious than trade. Trade is kind of the thing that opened the door to a lot of discussions, but China has become, as put by this administration and by the Defense Department, a strategic competitor, not a strategic partner. And that's not a strategic competitor on trade, that's a strategic competitor strategically in the world, okay? So this is much bigger than trade. So we can talk about the trade aspect. You know, a deal that would be satisfying to us would really unravel a lot of the trade mercantilism and state ownership that this current president of China has, you know, pushed on the world. It really came to a head when he came out with his China 2025 program, and he basically said, not basically, he did say, we are going to dominate the industries of the future. He didn't say we're going to be a partner with the world. He didn't say we were going to be a leader. He said we were going to dominate.
How does that differ, though, from the bravado that the U.S. does, Dan?
Oh, way different. It's a communist nation.
I mean, but the U.S. does the same thing to some degree.
No.
Maybe a little bit more benevolently.
Not even close.
No, you don't think so?
No.
So what does it look like? How steadfast?
Our businesses are not state-owned. They're not owned by the Communist Party.
Good point.
So when the chairman or the head of the Communist Party says, we are going to dominate the world, that is all of the hundreds of state-owned enterprises, including Hawaii and all the rest of them, okay, that he's speaking for.
Right.
The President of the United States says that. He's not speaking for the multinational companies in this country, per se, okay? They have freedom. We are a market-based, open, free economy. China is not. They are a trade mercantilist. They are a state-owned entity. When they joined the WTO in 2000, they promised, and when they got permanent favored nation trading status from the United States, which allowed them to get into the WTO.
Were you against that?
They couldn't have. Yes, I was.
Yeah.
Okay. They promised in both of those cases to become a market-based economy, to move away from state ownership, to open their markets to the world. Mm-hmm. And the world said, great, we embrace you as part of the World Trading Organization. China has not lived up to one of the many, many, many promises that were part of that agreement. Not one. In fact, they have gone the other way. They've become more state-dominated and more aggressive with stealing intellectual property, hacking of everything you can think of, not just in our country, but the world. Okay, they become very aggressive, and they basically have practiced a form of economic aggression known to the world for centuries as trade mercantilism, like nobody has before. Okay, so there's nothing free, nothing open market, nothing market-based about what we're dealing with China, which is totally different than the United States.
So
totally.
how if as you advised the president in the beginning, as you talk about it internally with your colleagues around trade, how much would you recommend that this country remain steadfast in the dialogue now? How much pain do we endure economically, domestically, to get our point across?
Haven't had any pain yet, by the way, but go ahead.
You haven't had any pain yet?
No, we haven't. I'm talking about the country hasn't.
But back to the question, Dan, how much do we go to the mat and how long do we hold to what we think is the appropriate debate? Speaking
for myself and many of the people that I worked with in the Trump campaign and continue to work with in the administration as a member and advisor to the USTR. I'm a member of the Advisory Committee on Trade and Policy Negotiation, okay, which is a presidential appointment. And I've been on that for the last year plus. My position is, and many of our position is, this is an existential battle we are in with China. This is not a trade battle. Trade is the tip of the iceberg, okay? And this is much bigger than trade, but trade is a focal point and a starting point to work to get all the other issues, because the other issues influence trade. Mm-hmm. Whether they're stealing $380 billion a year of our intellectual property from our companies, okay, $380 billion a year. That's in addition to a $380 billion trade deficit, okay? So this is much more serious than that. So when you ask me, how should we go forward and how strong should we be and how strongly we should stick to our position.
For how long?
Yeah. All right, as long as it takes and as strong as possible. It's very simple. Mm-hmm. This is not just about buying soybeans or steel or anything else. This is much bigger than that. The president has understood that. The defense experts in our government understand that. Our economic, even the Treasury Department understands that. Okay. Now everybody would like to make this thing go away and have China become a market-based, non-state-owned economy, stop practicing its economic aggression and stealing of IP and everything else. All right. The problem is, this is their mantra. This is, as declared by their leader, this is China 2025.
In the first Gulf War, and I'm going to make a point, it's a bit of a metaphor, but it's certainly an example. In the first Gulf War, then President George Bush was able to build a coalition.
Yeah.
Where is the coalition beyond
building.
the U.S.?
It's building as we speak. Because what we had before was a trading system that people basically sold their souls to for the short-term potential benefit of having access to the great, huge market potential of China.
Yeah.
Going way back to when we gave them permanent nation trading status in the 90s, okay? And so all of our allies, while they may be allies from a military standpoint, have not been our allies from an economic standpoint. In fact, many of our allies have practiced their own forms of economic aggression against us, and we've allowed it. Mm-hmm. So we're as much to blame as they are for what they've done. This president's come along and said enough's enough. So give you the steel industry as an example. For decades, we sat down and talked about global overcapacity on a global basis with countries, every country that makes steel in the world. We could never get a unified approach to hold China or other countries accountable for their massive overcapacity they built.
So China, and I'm sorry, just for clarification,
Yeah.
China would at that point, and I'll use the term, they would dump steel just to get it in the market.
Oh, yes. They would dump steel to maintain political stability and employment at home, and that is part of a state-run, nonprofit motivated economy as opposed to a market-based, profit-motivated economy. And just to give you an example, again, we worked to do this on bringing people together, and it didn't happen. And so does our government. They've done it through Bush 1, Clinton, right. Reagan tried to do it, okay, Obama to a lesser extent, okay, but there was no building of a coalition because they didn't want to. So what our whole strategy was and still is hey guys, we're going to make you feel the same pain we're feeling.
Does China get
and then maybe we can build a coalition, and that's exactly what's happening.
So you see the congealing of a coalition
Absolutely.
behind the U.S.
Again, I can use steel as an example if you want.
Europe, South America,
Japan,
et cetera,
Korea,
all falling in line.
Canada.
So what do you think the tipping point is for China? When do you think that and they're never going to be, as you said, they will never agree to what the full terms that the U.S. are, but when do you think they will get to a point where they find that it will be a progressively hard thing for them to hold out?
They have to fall all the way back and abide by the original promises and commitments they made to join the WTO, which is all we're asking for, by the way. You know, there's a whole lot, I've gone through a whole lot of issues, right. But all of that was consistent with them and the promises, okay? They didn't get into the WTO by promising to steal everybody's intellectual property. They didn't get into the WTO because they said they were going to build massive overcapacity in industry after industry that would be state-owned and state-dominated and dump their product on the world and destroy the manufacturing sectors and the industries, the basic industries of the world. That's not how they got in. They promised just the opposite. They said, yeah. So as an example, if they were living up to their agreements, again, using steel, because steel is kind of the canary in the coal mine for what has taken place. They declared steel a strategic industry in 2000. They had maybe 150 million tons of capacity to make steel. Today they have a billion.
What's the U.S.'s capacity? How does that compare?
130 million. The world's capacity is 2.3 billion, and they have over a billion of it.
So they have almost half.
Okay. And we have about 600 million tons of overcapacity in the world because of that. So if they were a market-based economy, here's the way it would have gone down. China wants to become a manufacturing base for the world. Great. Okay, we let companies come in, help us build our manufacturing base. Okay, and in order to provide the steel to build the infrastructure, we have a choice. We can be mercantilistic and predatory and totally go against our promises and commitments to the WTO and build 1 billion tons worth of capacity and not absorb the world's overcapacity. A market-based economy, because they want to conserve capital, they want to be profitable, what they would have done is they'd have built 400 million tons of steelmaking capacity, and then allowed the rest of the world to provide the steel, the other 500 million tons they needed, from the massive oversupply that existed in the world. So that's the way a market-based economy works. That's the way our economy works. That's all right. They chose to do just the opposite, and they want to do the same thing, what they did in steel, to semiconductors, to artificial intelligence, to aerospace, to space. You name it. Automobiles. That's part of their 2025 strategy.
Well, and let me ask you, let me take that one more further. And by the way, you know, you're far more valuable with all of your knowledge around business and economy that we're not going to talk about China for the whole time. I want to get into some of these other things. But
please,
before we leave this.
You know, I wrote a book called American Made, Why Making Things That Return Us to Greatness. You can, you
get it all in there.
It's all in there, baby.
But Dan, this idea that they are dominating steel as you saw it from Nucor. But help us understand.
The world saw it. But that is Nucor saw it.
Okay,
the world.
I'll give you that. But let me come to a specific. Charlotte Pipe and Foundry.
Yeah.
Billion, and it's just a guess. $1 billion or
Dow's,
so.
great people, great company, good grades.
Have done well. Privately held company, and the reason I'm highlighting them is there is, and it's surprising to me, and I want you to explain this to me. There is a company in China that calls itself Charlotte Pipe and Charlotte Pipe.
And uses the same logos.
How do they?
And same letterhead.
How do they get away with that?
Because it's China. Because it's what they want to do. They want to steal, duplicate, and then push out. So.
But isn't there some kind of
there's
legal
nothing.
Justice mechanism to say you can't do that?
There is, but we have to go through a prolonged multi-year legal effort to get satisfaction through our legal system here, our trading law system. They over there just show up one day and they say, we're going to do this, and everybody that's there is related to the state-owned enterprises and to the Communist Party, and they just say, we're going to do it. This is the way we do business. We will steal their logo, we will steal their name, all right, and we will produce product, and we'll even put labels on the product, identical to what Charlotte Pipe puts on. So you know what happened? They won a major trade case.
You mean Charlotte Pipe?
Charlotte Pipe did, just recently, against the Chinese.
Does it compel them?
And there's penalties and there's reparations and they are experiencing now a level playing field without that trade cheating company and others in China. This one just went to the extreme of copying their own name and logo. All right, it's amazing. That's how bold and brazen they are. Okay.
Right. Yeah. Okay. All right.
That's what happens when you have that kind of mentality running your business community instead of an open free market.
And let's make it
just so you know, the Coalition for Prosperous America is all about this trade issue, okay? And one of our leading members is Roddy Dowd and Charlotte Pipe and Tube.
Let's make the transition to the economy, and let me make it how much of a liability, how much of a casualty is the U.S. economy? Could it be, as the U.S. continues to hold China accountable? How willing are we to go to the mat?
We're willing to go to the mat. Trump's going to the mat. If the people in the talking heads on CNBC and all the other programs that talk about Wall Street, they all say, the president watches what's going on Wall Street. He sees what happens every time the trade talk turns negative, and he's not going to risk a meltdown in the stock market. The stock market is not the economy. The stock market is a reflection of the economy, okay? So he's focusing on issues, as I said before, that are hugely important to the future health of our economy and our nation, and for the world, for that matter. And so he's going to stay steadfast. If he doesn't, it'd be a major disappointment to a lot of people. My belief is that he's going to stay steadfast. He's got people in the administration that I have worked with and continue to work with that are steadfast in this.
I know you've been.
So the economy is not going to be affected to the extent that all the Chicken Littles running around are saying.
Yes.
They said that the steel tariffs were going to cause the sky to fall. Well, they didn't. They've actually resulted in more jobs being created than quote unquote lost, okay, because of the steel tariffs, all right? And now they're saying, well, if it goes to 25%, it's going to be the end of the world. That's what they said about the 10%. It's not the end of the world. The only thing that really affected the stock market was Powell.
Okay, let's move on to the economy. When you look out 2019, the balance of this year, 2020, with your hat, so you retired Chairman Emeritus from
Yes.
Nucor 5 years ago, plus or minus.
Still very actively involved in things.
I
Not
know
with
you
Nucor,
are.
but
I know you are.
partially with Nucor.
So when you look at Nucor's business, when you notice the industry, when you look at some of your other colleagues, what do you think is going to happen the next year or two in the economy?
We're going to have another strong year in 2019.
When do you think?
And a lot of the pundits are saying the very same thing.
Yes.
Except for the Chicken Little guys.
Yes. Okay.
All right?
Tell me how you really feel.
And the Chicken Little guys want to create an environment where they can short stuff and take advantage of it and make money that way. The reality is, we have the strongest economy in the world, including versus China. China's numbers you can't believe.
Okay.
The realistic numbers I've heard is their growth is 1 point something percent.
We're going to leave China alone.
But the U.S. has a strong economy for the right reasons. What President Trump did and his team of economic advisors, of which I was one, put together a strategy that was presented during the campaign for improving our global competitiveness, because our global competitiveness has been undermined for a lot of reasons. And that consisted of 4 main categories with a 5th with an asterisk. Mm-hmm. The 4 main efforts were tax reform, trade reform, regulatory reform, and energy reform. And he's hitting on all cylinders, okay? And that's why the economy is doing so well. The 5th one, with an asterisk, is infrastructure. And my bet is this is something that Democrats and the Republicans in Congress come together on this year. And we have an infrastructure plan, not as big as it needs to be, but significantly greater than what it has been.
So do you think
that's going to add to the benefit?
Okay, so do you think fiscal policy is could mean more to a slowing economy than monetary policy?
When you say monetary policy, you're talking about the Fed?
The Federal Reserve.
I think that the reason the economy is strong is because of fiscal policy, what Trump is doing, okay, with his 5-point plan, executing on it extremely successfully. We can go to each one if you want, but that's a summary.
No, I'll take that.
Okay? The monetary policy comes into place where the rest of the world is slowing down. At some point, it will have an effect on us. The issue in people's minds is how much of an effect and how long will they be going down instead of plateauing and coming back up. Just this week, what did you hear about from every central bank in the world? Literally. They're lowering rates.
Right.
Okay.
Well, is that because the Fed decided not to do anything?
No, they're lowering rates because their economy is slowing. All right? Now, back in September, our own Fed decided to get tough. And they came out with a very strong statement about how aggressive they were going to be in raising rates. And what happened?
The more uncertainty in the economy, right?
The stock market went this way.
Right.
Now, they tried to blame it on trade, but there wasn't enough going on in trade except for what people's fears were, not the reality, to cause that. What really caused it, and you saw it, when the Fed said, okay, we're going to pause and not do anything more, the market kicked back up again.
So would you be concerned at all about a broad-based slowdown at the end of next year, 2020?
For the U.S.?
U.S. in general.
No. What usually happens in election years?
Right. The market goes up. Sure.
I mean, this is not me talking. This is history talking. Okay?
All right. We've got 4 minutes left. I want to talk about you.
That's it, huh?
Yeah. Believe it or not. I know. That's surprising, isn't it? RNC, Republican National Convention, going to Charlotte, of which you are on the steering committee and a major
I'm on a
part
host committee, yes.
On the host committee.
Helping raise some funds as well.
When you look at how the DNC did in Charlotte, how you hope the RNC will do in Charlotte, what do you think the RNC is going to do in Charlotte? How is that going to work?
I think the RNC is going to do everything to put on a very good convention to the benefit of Charlotte. Now, it's up to the Charlottinians, all right, as to whether or not Charlotte helps in putting that good show forward. Okay, I believe they will. Otherwise, they wouldn't have said yes, okay? But at the end of the day, it takes both groups to make it a success. My sense from where I'm involved with is the Republicans are going to put forward a great effort. It's going to be, should be, based upon what we're doing, a very successful convention, a positive thing for Charlotte. Mm-hmm. The whole idea why behind a lot of us are supporting it is, listen, Charlotte hosted the Democratic convention.
What did you learn from that?
Okay.
You know, can you?
And
we have a minute left, by the way.
We're not even going to talk about the Charlotte Independence by the sounds of it. Okay.
I'm sorry.
No, you should have got to it sooner. Okay. Did you ask me about my red shirt? I wear it every
Okay,
Friday.
Red Shirt Friday.
To support our men and women in the military. I've been doing it for 20 years, as all my teammates at Nucor have been doing and around the country. Okay? As far as what we've learned, listen, we're doing things different. The Democratic Party didn't take any money from companies, supposedly. Okay, although Duke did loan them $10 million.
Now we are running out of time.
Now the Republicans, they will be taking money from corporations.
Okay.
Our interest in doing this is to have Charlotte look good and say, listen, we put on a great Democratic convention, we put on a great Republican convention, we're America's city, okay?
That's the last comment. Dan, please come back, and I know I said this last time, but come back so we can talk about the Charlotte Independence. I'm glad to see you. Thanks for wearing the red shirt, by the way.
Thanks for the red tie.
So, yeah, I did it just for this. Dan, nice to see you again. Thanks for
My
being
pleasure.
here. Yeah.
Thank you, Chris.
Thank you. Thank you for watching our program. Any questions or comments, please make them to us. Until next week, good night.
So let's do another.
Major funding for Carolina Business Review was provided by the Duke Endowment, Barings, Grant Thornton, Colonial Life, Sunoco, Blue Cross Blue Shield of South Carolina, and by viewers like you. Thank you. Promotional consideration provided by Business North Carolina Magazine. For more information, visit carolinabusinessreview.org.